Hey everyone, welcome to Birds of a Feather. Today we've got a really simple upcycle project using a piece of leather scrap and some linen cording, a hole punch, and this thrifted item. I'm going to go ahead and paint this caddy, but if you want to see the full video, I'll link to it down in the description. You can also find it up in the card in the right hand corner. I'm just going to cut my piece of leather. I'm just going to get some irons here just to weigh the ruler down and help me out so it doesn't slip on me. Then I'm going to take this Olfa cutter and I'm just going to off the leather here. I'm just going to lean it up against the edge of that ruler, and then I'm going to come down and press and engage. And that cuts right through and gives me my nice straight edge that I can measure by. What I'm going to end up doing is just recovering the handle. I'm not a fan of this plastic here. It really cheapens it. And I'll have more than enough leather to go around. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to cut a parallel edge so that I can see what my maximum width is going to be. Just measure over to the narrowest part here. And what I have here is this Fons & Porter chalk pencil. It's a ceramic chalk, and I find that it marks the leather really well and doesn't really mar it. Can just brush right off. Okay, so again, I'm going to line up the ruler and I'll just add my weights here, and I'm going to line up the edge of the blade with the edge of the ruler. It's a metal edge here, and I'll just roll it on until it engages. My piece is cut. Now I've got two parallel lines. Now I'll take a piece of paper and I've just folded it straight on one edge. I'm just going to wrap it around, and where it meets, I'm just going to fold it back on itself and make a crease there. Now I'm going to measure from my straight edge here to where that crease is, and that's about 3.5 inches. Once again, I'm just going to take my chalk pencil and make some markings. Now I'm going to measure down my 3.5 inches, but I'll make my mark there. Before you lift, just make sure that you've cut totally through. And there's my piece. When you do this measuring with a piece of paper, this is just thin and so it meets. You take your thick leather here and try to do the same thing. You have to really account for that thickness. So what I would suggest is to perhaps try to take this plastic lacing off and see if that buys me any more width here. See if I can unravel it, and I'll just go ahead and unravel the whole thing. This will probably just make it easier when I come to paint it too, not to have this in the way. Leather should stretch and it should give. I could get it to stretch. As you'll see later, it did stretch and it was perfectly fine. I think what I'm going to do is punch my holes and give it a try, and if it doesn't work, I'll just cut a new one with another scrap. So to cut the holes, I'm going to be using this punch here, and to set the consistency, measure in about 3/16, and then I'm just going to take the end of this pencil here and just kind of scratch in a line, so you can see that line. And again, I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. But now that I have my line, I can set my holes. There are tools that you can buy that have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prongs on that you can just set over the line that you scored and just punch it with a hammer and you get your holes. However, I don't have that tool. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring out every 3/16. I'm starting in like 1/8 of an inch from each edge, and then I'm measuring 3/16 and I'm making a little divot with this sharp lacer. Now that I've got my divots, I'm going to take this tool, and I've got it on the smallest hole punch here. Just get all that junk out of there. So I'm going to center over the hole, and I'm positioning it right on the line, and then I'm just going to squeeze it together and punch that through. Now if you find that it's not quite going through, you can take a sharp point and just give it a poke. And there you're getting your holes. So I'm going to finish this off camera so that I can get up close and personal with it and actually see what I'm doing. We're finally at the last step, and that is to add our leather band onto the handle. And to do that, I'm using a waxed linen thread. I've cut off a length here, and essentially you're going to thread 2 needles on either end. So I'm just feeding this through. So I'm going to wrap it around once, and then I'm going to split the thread right in the middle and come through. This part's a little finicky. Of course, I had no problem doing this off camera when I did my test. It's always when you're on camera. Okay, so that's on there. I'm going to pull that down, and then I'm going to pull that tight. Now it's locked in place. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to thread the eye of the needle. Going to wrap it around once. Then on the second pass, I'm just going to try to split the thread right through the center. And again, this is really finicky. So you're going to pull it down and then pull it back up so it tightens, and then it's not going anywhere. We've got our 2 needles threaded at either end. I'm going to bring back our box here. So that linen thread was pretty flimsy, so I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to try this other thread from Art Minds. As you can see, it's much thicker, so I'm hoping that when I have to tug on this, it's not going to break as this one did. So let's start again. I'm going to rethread, and we're going to come back to try this again. And now we're going to take it to the caddy. I'll just center it. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not going to measure. I've got a Velcro strap here. I'm just going to add this on just for another set of hands here, just to help me out. The Velcro does a great job of holding it in place, so that's a good little tip for you. Okay, so that's on. Now I've got my 2 needles here. I'm just going to turn the work around. We're going to be doing a cross stitch, so we're going to bring the needle through from underneath. Then we're going to take our other needle and also bring it underneath. Now we're just going to even out the ends of the thread here. Now it doesn't really matter which way you go. I'm just going to loop back again with one of the needles. And squeeze tight. And as you can see, those ends are coming together. Now I'm going to take my right hand needle and I'm going to come 1 hole down and insert, and then I'm going to come directly across into the opposite hole and pull that through. That creates our first cross. Now I'm taking the left hand needle and I'm coming through that same hole and coming directly across. And notice that my thread is forward so that it doesn't get tangled. And then I'm going to pull through. Give it a good tight squeeze and make sure you're tightening up so those edges butt. As you can see, that's really nice and tight. Now we're going to repeat the same process again, taking the right needle, coming 1 hole down, sorry, you're coming in from this direction, 1 hole down, and opposite, and pull through. Now you're picking up your left needle here, you're coming through that same hole and coming out directly across. Now do be sure you're pulling tight as you go, because you don't have the option of coming back. Got to do it with each individual hole as tight as you can. Right hand needle, one hole down, directly across and through. Left hand needle, back through that same hole, directly across and through. And pull as tight as you can. You want those edges to butt together. But that's what we have so far. So we're just going to repeat this same process all the way down the line until we get to the end. Again, be sure to squeeze tight so you bring those edges together. Now I do want to mention that earlier when I originally cut this piece and I used the paper pattern, I really thought it was going to be too small, but as you can see, it really does stretch quite a bit. So I think a lot of this measuring and binding handles, as I'm doing here, it comes with experience in knowing the thickness of the leather and just exactly what size you have to cut your piece to be able to stretch it like this. Okay, so I can now move this back. When you're doing this, just be sure you're consistent in which needle you're using first. So I'm using the right needle and then the left. Just don't switch it up in the middle or you're not going to get the consistency of this lacing here. This really is a beautiful stitch. Makes me want to lace up anything I have with a handle with scrap leather. It's such a great way to reuse and upcycle any scraps. And I got these scraps from a person who makes leather products for a living. So if you can find someone like that local to you, that you can just buy their ends, then there really is a lot you can do. At this point I think I can remove my Velcro. You should always really try to cut more thread than you think you're going to need. And I think I went like 6 times the length and then doubled it. So fingers crossed it gets me to the end and I'm going to have enough. Keep in mind too, as I showed you before, my previous thread broke. It was just way too thin for this purpose. That was a linen thread. I believe this one is cotton. I'm not quite sure. It doesn't really say anything on the package. Keep in mind which needle you're using. And keep it consistent. And I'm keeping the thread in front of me so that there's no chance of getting tangled. Here's how it's looking so far. As you can see, it's pulling together quite well. When I first cut this, I wasn't quite sure it was going to work out, but as you can see, it did work out in the end. Okay, we're on our second last one here. And luckily I made it to the end with plenty to spare. To finish off, I'm going to come over back through the hole as I did at the beginning. I'm going to come out this hole. Now do the same on the other side, coming opposite. And back through again. And again, tighten. Now what I'm going to do is form a knot here at the end. I'm going to poke that knot down through the hole. And then I'll come in with a pair of scissors and cut that really close. And just poke that down. I'll do the same with the other side. Form a knot. Make sure it's as tight as you can get it. Once again, I'm going to poke it down into that hole. Just seat it in there really well. Take my scissors, cut that off, and just finish poking that in. Now I've seen people singeing these and adding glue, but I don't want to add glue and mar the leather. And there we go. Our handle's all done. If you enjoyed this project, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to get notifications of our upcoming projects. Are you interested in trying out some of these products? I'll leave links down in the description. Thanks for watching. Join us again soon for another flip on the fly.